Year 11, this is Miss Ross Smith. I just want to talk you through another Macbeth extract before your literature exam. So you will recognise this one, it's one I gave you in class, and I've got some of the Google Slides snapshotted here as well, which should just make it a little bit less clunky than the first film. So you will have your extract in front of you, you will look at the top, it will give you a little bit of information about where in the play the extract comes from, and you'll look at the extract and then you'll go to the question at the bottom with your highlighter in your hand and you will highlight the question wording. So this one is how far you think Shakespeare presents Macbeth as cowardly in the play, because you're quite likely to get something about cowardice or bravery. We might get something about sort of power or masculinity. They're the kind of big questions you're going to get asked. So you'll need to look at how Shakespeare presents Macbeth in this speech, that's bullet point number 1, and then how Macbeth is presented by Shakespeare in the rest of the play. So as you know, we've looked at this extract a bit and we talked about some of the things that come up. So we know this is straight after Duncan's murder, and we've got Macbeth saying all these kind of negative things: I'll go no more, I'm afraid, I dare not go back. So we've got quite a negative semantic field there, which could connote his cowardice at this point. It certainly shows quite a lot of fear as well. And Lady Macbeth scolds him. So I've got a nice exclamation mark to show that she's angry, or maybe she's shouting. She says, "Infirm of purpose, give me the daggers." So she is going to do the thing that he is not able to do, which shows that she's brave and he is cowardly. So you could zoom in on that evidence there instead and say, actually, Macbeth's behaviour is one thing, he's clearly scared, but it's Lady Macbeth's behaviour that really highlights how cowardly he is. She then goes on to talk about sort of the sleeping and the dead. There's some nice metaphors in there about, it's the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. So that might be a good one to look at, because she's sort of calling him childish, perhaps immature. Obviously he's meant to be this big kind of battle-hardened noble warrior, so to diminish him and make him feel small like that might also link to ideas to do with cowardice. Also, the idea of fearing a painted devil is a nice bit of foreshadowing, so there's an F for foreshadowing, for all the hallucinations that Macbeth has after that. So you could link to Banquo, because he sort of reduces back to this kind of quivering wreck of a character, Macbeth does, when he thinks he sees Banquo's ghost shaking his gory locks at him. And then Lady Macbeth makes excuses for Macbeth in Act 3 and sort of says, oh, this fit has affected him since childhood, so there's a little link there as well. Then she leaves and Macbeth is on his own on stage just for a moment, and again we have lots of evidence of cowardice. So we have all of these questions that come up, and he's saying that, sort of sound appalls him, so he's clearly very frightened. He looks at his own hands and he's horrified. So his questions could show things like confusion, because perhaps he's sort of dissociating a bit here, he doesn't really know what's going on. It can just show complete fear as well, he needs reassurance, he's sort of talking out loud, talking to himself, so all of those things might link to the fact that he's scared and he's being a coward. Now this bottom section as well, with all of Neptune's great oceans wash blood clean from my hands, and another question there, oh, there we go, also shows his horror at the blood, which would be unusual given he's meant to have killed all of these Norwegians in battle. So anything there would give you things to analyse within this speech. I think you probably say quite a lot about the semantic field, about the foreshadowing, perhaps about the contrast, which we've been calling the role reversal between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. All of those things would give you lots to talk about. So I'll go on to page 2. Time. These slides are on the Google Classroom. They're presented a bit better there somehow when I've imported them in to explain everything. They've gone a little bit strange. So it's read the extract, tick that off, you've done that. Read the question and highlight the question wording. You'll have done that, tick that off. Choose some really good evidence from the extract to analyse, whatever you want to call it, PE, PEA, PEL, analyse the language. So tell the examiner about the language. Be as specific as you can. If there is terminology there, say that it's foreshadowing, say that it's alliteration, say that it's metaphors. Make sure it's accurate as you can be. I would recommend then you choose evidence from the rest of the play, do sort of one bullet point at a time, do all of this in the extract, then move on to elsewhere. So we'll go to page 3. And you will recognise this. I think these kind of big statements are ones that you might get a question on. So you could spend half an hour just looking at one of these, turn it into a spider diagram for some revision, sort of put on it, which bits of the play Macbeth is definitely brave, because in some ways he becomes quite brave at the end. He's sort of quite brave when he goes back to the witches in Act 4 as well. So use this to help you. Use your play text, put down whatever it is, the sort of quotations or the page numbers to help you. Obviously this doesn't cover everything. Trust your instincts. If you have other ideas, by all means use them. That's another really good kind of flexible revision to do. Just sort of, trust yourself. What do you know about Lady Macbeth? Would you sum her up as the sort of the pink things I've got her as in this, or do you think she's something else? So I'll go to page 4. Now the formatting has gone here a bit, so I'm sorry. It's online, so by all means use that, it'll be a bit clearer. So remember that actually you are being asked how far in this question you agree with the statement. So how far do you think Shakespeare presents Macbeth as cowardly? So you can agree and say Macbeth is completely cowardly here in this extract and throughout the rest of the play. You could completely disagree and say, I don't think he's cowardly. I think it's normal to be terrified of a horrible murder. It's totally rational to be horrified by it. Entirely up to you. Whichever you decide to do, make sure, this is the key thing, that you have supporting evidence. That must be quotations. I recommend short, little integrated quotations, perhaps, 6 words, a whole line if it really is a whole line you need that's useful. From that, I would choose at least 2 parts of the extract speech to focus on as well. So one set of evidence for, whatever the first one is, Macbeth thinking he hears knocking might be one, and another one for Macbeth of saying he's never going to get his hands clean of the blood. Then you also need to remember other parts of the play where Macbeth was considered either as cowardly or as brave. So we know he was brave at the beginning. He's described as noble. We know that bravery and masculinity are all presented as sort of good qualities in a leader, and that links to our context of patriarchy and the context of soldiership as well. We know, so that was sort of brave at the beginning, so that's your kind of Act 1. We also know that Macbeth is then terrified, perhaps even more terrified of Banquo than he is of the idea of killing Duncan at this point. So you could look at your Act 3 as well, and the Lady Macbeth making excuses for him for some role reversal. You could go then that he's brave when he's in Act 4, so he's sort of unnaturally confident after the witch's prophecy, but then quickly unnerved again when the woods start to move towards the castle. So that's a bit of Act 5, but he does say things like, my castle's strength will laugh a scorn to your siege. You know the quotation, you know which one I mean. So that gives you sort of rest of play to think about, but you really only probably have time to choose maybe 2 to get the second bullet point evidenced in your work. Try to get some context in if you can. The bullets don't quite work here, but you've got the kind of usual ones we've talked about: male power over women, superstition and witchcraft, religion and the divine right of kings, and the performance in 17th century that women were played by men. Bear those things in mind, particularly when you're talking about role reversal and female empowerment, because obviously Lady Macbeth would have been played by a man at that point. I'm going to go to my final slide. And this didn't present beautifully, but you've seen it before. Now, these were my examples to try and give you clues on how to do this. So I've got a first sort of in the extract one, is this one on this side. I've got keywords, I've got cowardly. I've already got in that one the rest of play just there, because I'm talking about brave and noble. I'm talking about him being considered a worthy thane. Then I switched to sort of this scene, and I keep using Shakespeare presents, which are the key words that you will have highlighted in your question. And then I start to look at the evidence. I think I went for semantic fields here to do with cowardice, and then Lady Macbeth's reaction showing the role reversal, which is a bit further down there. Then show you how I might try to go about linking this extract to the rest of the play. I talk about Macbeth's change into cowardice, which seems to sort of be triggered by Duncan's murder and the blood on his hand, and how that continues throughout Act 2 and into Act 3. And I've got the Lady Macbeth saying the eye of childhood. I've got the foreshadowing of the hallucinations in there. I've tried to get ideas about metaphors in as well. And if you sort of read that through, hopefully if I've succeeded, I've got things like question wording, I've got presentation of cowardly, I've got Shakespeare, a little bit of context in there as well. So what else could I have included in that extract? I could have used the questions as a technique to show fear and confusion. I could have used the semantic field of blood and gore, perhaps to show how sort of horrific this would be and why that would frighten him, make him look like a coward. I could have done the hearing things and think about the staging, because it is a play, to get sort of, I suppose, paranoia in there. And then also linking to the idea that Lady Macbeth kind of manipulates him into doing this by saying, if you were, if thou do it, then thou durst be a man. And then this instantly kind of unravels him. So Macbeth is trying to be masculine. I don't think I'll fit it on the screen. I'll just go mask for masculine. But unfortunately, it does all unravel. That would give you lots of ways to link into cowardice. I hope that's been helpful. And let me know if you've got any questions. Thank you.